Hi everybody, my name is Wendy Spencer. This is my first YouTube video that I've made on my own. I've been a hairstylist for 37 years and I have been married for 35 years and have 5 children and 14 grandchildren. And I'm not a prophet. I've had a handful of visions and I've had a lot of dreams. Plenty that have come true. And I wanted to share with you how Yahweh has taught me how to stay spiritually prepared, and how he first spoke to me many years ago about how I was not prepared and I didn't understand what he meant fully, actually, until like 3 summers ago. But it starts out more than 20 years ago. But I first want to share with you something that happened to me as a focal point about 18 years ago. And I worked in Folsom at a hair salon, and I used to go to the Starbucks across the street every day for coffee. And one day I went to go get coffee and I decided to drive because it was raining outside. And when I got in my car and began to start it, I felt inside a warning, an urge very strongly: do not go to Starbucks today. And in my mind's eye, I could see these like flying gargoyle kind of creatures flying around the building, but I looked across the street and there was one car over there. There was nothing going on. It wasn't being robbed. It wasn't crowded. And with every motion that I went to go out the parking lot, this feeling got stronger. And I finally said, fine, Lord, I won't go. I'll go to Java Central around the corner. And I went and got my coffee. And on my way back, I said, Father, if that was you, I would really like to know why I wasn't supposed to go to Starbucks today. Well, a week went by and I was taking a new client that I had never done before. As a matter of fact, I never saw him after this one haircut, but his eyes were bloodshot and he looked like he had had a very bad day. And I mentioned something and he said, yes, I had a really bad day. His best friend's 17-year-old daughter had died the night before, and he just found out. She had contracted meningitis that was going around the local high school there. As a matter of fact, he tells me she worked across the street at the Starbucks. Maybe you've seen her before. And we talked a little bit about that, and I finished his haircut. And on my way home, the Lord reminded me of what had happened when he had warned me not to go to Starbucks. And I was like, oh, wow, that's why you didn't want me to go. Now, some people get meningitis and they survive, and some people die. And my great-grandmother happened to die from meningitis. And I realized that had I gone over there that day, I would have come in contact with that virus somehow. She was probably working, and I could have become very ill or even died. And I thought to myself, that poor 17-year-old girl, I know that she wasn't loved by God any more than I was. What was the difference between me and her? And what I felt impressed from the Lord at that moment was, it wasn't that, I was more important or that he loved me more. It was that I had been taught to pay attention to his voice. And I had the relationship with him so that I could hear when it was important. And I don't know if she was a believer or not, but she had not heeded the warnings. And maybe it was, don't drink from your friend, don't eat from your friend. Maybe you should stay home today. I don't know what the warning was to her, but had she heeded the warning, she would have lived a much longer life. And I'll go back a few years when the Lord first started showing me about the coming storms that were going to take place. And I had been asking him about a coming move that I had been hearing that would take place in the world, where there would be a lot of signs and wonders, and the dead would be raised and the blind would see. And I was also commenting to the Father about the condition of his people, how there's just as much sickness and disease with his people, just as much sin, just as much adultery, fornication. I mean, that his people look just like the world, that there was no difference. And when was this move of God going to take place? And I won't go into the details of the vision because I'm going to try to make this video shorter. But what he showed me in California at the time about a move of God that would take place, and how it would be from the tears of brokenness and repentance that would be what would cause this move of God. And this was something he shared with me 22 years ago. And he shared with me at that time, this was the calm before the storm. And then a short time later, he spoke to me before the beginning of the worship and study time with a group of people. And he said to me, I'm going to take the world by storm. And I found myself needing to be alone. And I went into the back room by myself, and I got down on my knees, and I began to have a vision. And in this vision, I could see someone's feet standing on a rock in a low-lying river. And Yahweh said to me, many of my people believe their lives are built upon this rock. And I understood that rock to be his word, his ways. But their lives are built on things and stuff, sports, entertainment, jobs, education, families. They're just so busy. And he said, when the storm comes, they will be swept away. And he said, weep for my children, weep for my children. And I understood that those people being swept away meant that they were going to die early, before their time. And I wept and I wept and I cried. Now, another 10 years went by, and I had a dream about being in the middle of a disaster. And I won't share all the details of that. But when I woke up from that dream in such terror, because I was getting ready to die in this disaster, God spoke to me and he said, surely a disaster is coming and your family will be safe, but you are not prepared. And I was dumbfounded, like, well, I'm not prepared. I'm not prepared. What does that mean? I'm not prepared. What kind of not prepared? And I began to fast and pray. And there was a lot of things that took place in my life at that time, but I did not get a full understanding of what it meant completely to be prepared and why I wasn't prepared. And it was 3 summers ago when my youngest son was sharing this young woman from Houston, Texas, a vision that she had. And her name was Pamela Banda. And on August 24th, 2016, she had a vision of a coming disaster. And while my son was reading this testimony of hers, he began to say that God had asked her to be prepared because he wanted to share something with her. And I knew instantly what she was supposed to do was to begin to fast and pray. But she was so busy in her life. She was a single mom. that she did not begin to fast and pray. And some time went by, and she had a regular day and came home and did her prayers after eating dinner and going to bed. And she was taken into a vision where she was in the middle of a disaster. And long story short, she was shown that there was going to be a disaster in Houston, Texas, and that actually where she lived, she would not be safe. And that she was going to need to move. And there's other details if you want to go to the testimony of her prophetic vision. I'm sure you can find it online. But what I realized at that moment was, a lot of people are expecting, for the rapture just to come and they're going to be taken away and they're not going to have to go through anything. And I think those people are going to be caught by surprise. And my prayer is that that Yahweh's people will begin to wake up and prepare themselves. And had this young woman not fasted and prayed, because she fasted and prayed after she had that vision to find out, what it was that she needed to do. And she would have stayed where she was, because a year later there was actually a hurricane that hit Houston, Texas, that was devastating. And it was, for quite some time, a lot of people, their houses were destroyed and they had to have their house. I mean, they couldn't live there. But there was people that died also. And because he heeded her warning, she was able to prepare. And that's my point. People think, well, I'm, God's child, he's going to protect me. But I was God's child back in, 2002. And had I not heeded the warning to not go to Starbucks that day, I quite possibly could have lived a much shorter life. And that was the point of God telling me that many of his people believe that their lives are built on that rock, but they're not, because they don't have the intimacy and they don't have the relationship and staying connected with God to hear, maybe they need to move, maybe they need to save food, maybe they need to have special medical supplies or, extra food for, babies or children, during a time of disaster, whether, it is civil war here in the United States, whether it is a natural disaster or possibly, the United States being invaded by another country. And we need to have that connection with God. And basically that's what I wanted to say, is just, it's important to have that time, of prayer and worship and connection with God, so that you can be prepared to hear what it is that you need to do during these times and the coming storms and things that are going to take place. I pray that this, goes to the people that need to hear it, and that Yahweh will protect us, but we need to be able to hear when he's warning us. Thank you.